Comic book retcons are a really interesting concept. They have the ability to be the coolest thing ever, or they have the ability to completely turn away an entire fanbase and ruin entire characters and arcs. We're gonna talk about the best of both worlds. Starting with Avengers 1 million. Introduced in Marvel Legacy number 1 over 1 million years ago, the early human mutant known as Firehair became the avatar of the Phoenix Force and nearly destroyed the entire planet. Now, realizing that that's bad, and that she wasn't the only one capable of that level of power, she began assembling a team of supernatural and mystical beings to protect humanity and Earth. The eventual team was made up of the Asgardian god Odin Bor's son, the demigod sorcerer Agamotto, the Black Panther of the Panther tribe, the woolly mammoth riding Ghost Rider, Iron Fist fan Faye, and a super smart caveman who wielded the Star Brand, which made him look surprisingly like the Hulk, but red. Now, after fighting some corrupted Celestials as well as time-traveling villains from the present like Thanos, multiple Doctor Dooms, and Mephisto, the team eventually disbanded. Now, I personally think it's really awesome. Like, the concept is just super cool. The only problem is that given the actual history of the Earth, and the history of some of the characters involved, and a whole bunch of things, actually it doesn't really make any sense. But whatever, man, there's a Ghost Rider riding a woolly mammoth. Sign me up, I'm there. But moving on, 2019's House of X number 2 revealed that Moira McTaggart had been a completely detectable mutant all along and had lived numerous lives already. This was because Moira's newly revealed mutant power was reincarnation, sort of. Basically, when Moira died, her consciousness would reincarnate in the past when she was still in her mother's tummy, thus allowing her to retain all of the memories of all of her different previous lives, but allowing her to modify the course of her life as she wished with all the prior information about how things went last time. So through this power, Moira had a total of 10 lives. While she was at the beginning a super loving and caring person, over time and over the course of her different lives, she began to hate mutants and began hating her own powers, which led her to try and create a mutant cure during the 3rd life. She tried to change her ways in the 4th, 5th, and 6th lives, but then got fed up and tried to take out the Trask bloodline in her 7th life. She then tried helping Magneto and Apocalypse in her 8th and 9th lives, and then in her 10th life, she pretended to be loving and caring while secretly plotting to depower the entire mutant population. While all of that ranks among the absolutely biggest twists in Marvel Comics history, Moira's ultimate goal also completely shifted from saving and helping mutants to destroying them entirely after Mystique and Destiny stripped her of her mutant powers, and she came back for an 11th time as a cyborg, allying herself with Orchis during the fall of X. Next up, Robert Reynolds, or as I like to call him, Bob, was granted the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns after consuming the Golden Sentry Serum, which was an offshoot of the original Super Soldier Serum, except like 100,000 times more powerful. He used his powers for the greater good of all and put together a costume to make his debut as the Sentry. He was the example of what a hero should be. He had connections to Iron Man, was active during the years just prior to Fantastic Four's emergence. He became a role model for Spider-Man as well as an ally to the X-Men and equal to Reed Richards and a friend to the Hulk. The Sentry battled alongside the Fantastic Four and defeated his greatest enemy, the General, with the help of the X-Men. Except we had actually never seen the Sentry in Marvel Comics till Sentry number 1 in July of 2000. That's because of Sentry's darker half, the Void, one of the most evil and destructive forces in the universe. The existence of the Void drove Sentry to team up with Doctor Strange and Reed Richards to erase the memory of Sentry from themselves and even the entire world. So really, Sentry had been around since before any of our favorite heroes had ever debuted. It actually worked really well, which we can't say of all the retcons on this list. For example, next up we are talking about the awful couple of Hawkeye and Mockingbird. This whole relationship honestly sort of seems like a cheap way of capitalizing on the Green Arrow and Black Canary coupling that DC had going on, but these two were nowhere near as compatible as their DC counterparts. The best example of that would be the whole thing surrounding a guy called Phantom Rider. To sum it all up, Mockingbird is caught and physically mistreated by the Phantom Rider, and so in turn, she eventually gets her revenge, taking the Rider's life. Now Hawkeye, instead of supporting his traumatized partner, is scared off by the fact that she took the life of her assailant, and he dumps her. Now while that really makes no sense considering Hawkeye's colorful past, and the fact that she took the life of someone who did something absolutely horrible to her, it it all got retconned. Now, the story changed so that Mockingbird actually consented to do the jiggy with Phantom Rider, which means she then took his life for seemingly no reason at all. On top of that though, instead of leaving it so that Hawkeye dumping her for taking a life for no reason makes a bit more sense, Hawkeye now just used the passing of Phantom Rider as the excuse to break up with her when the real reason was because she had actually cheated. Now look, they didn't talk about this next point in part 1, and this story will forever haunt my psyche. So next up is the Spider-Man story, Sins Past. This story contains within its strange pages the revelation that Gwen Stacy, former lover and a teenager, was having an ongoing affair with Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, a very, very creepy full-grown man, old enough to be her father. Not only was she having the affair, it even resulted with Gwen secretly giving birth to twins. Twins that Gwen threatened to keep from Norman, which became the new reason that Green Goblin tried to take her out. Twins that were half Green Goblin and grew up at a faster rate, and twins that became a pair of assassins and came to New York to attack Spider-Man. I do not recommend reading this story at all, because all you will be able to see when you close your eyes at night going forward is the incredibly creepy image of Norman and his Green Goblin face as he's laying on top of Gwen Stacy. But on to brighter and better things. Jean Grey's death in the Dark Phoenix saga remains among the most shocking passings in Marvel Comics history. Her sacrifice remains an unforgettable moment for many fans, despite the fact that Fantastic Four number 286 retconned it out of existence. Issue 286 established that instead of the Phoenix Force becoming one with Jean Grey and influencing her decisions throughout the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas, it turns out that the Jean Grey we saw wasn't Jean Grey at all, but was instead the Phoenix Force itself impersonating Jean Grey. The Jean Grey we all knew and loved was actually in stasis, in a cocoon, by the Phoenix Force at the bottom of Jamaica Bay, which is where her space shuttle crashed Uncanny X-Men number 101, and where she was reborn into the Phoenix originally. This brought the fan favorite character back to life, but devalued a large amount of the significance of the whole Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas for fans, and it made people start to hate Jim Shooter, Marvel's editor-in-chief at the time. Next up is Hydra Cap. The Marvel story Secret Empire introduced the idea that Captain America, the beacon of hope and the one who always did the right thing, was secretly this whole time undercover Hydra super soldier. This Hydra Cap organized the second superhuman civil war as well as a Chitauri invasion on the Earth. He got promoted to director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and influenced the legislation of the S.H.I.E.L.D. Act, which gave S.H.I.E.L.D. way more authority. He then used that new power to basically organize a Hydra takeover of America itself. Steve Rogers revealed himself as not only a long-time Hydra defector, but the Hydra Supreme. He allied himself with a new Madam Hydra, took advantage of a global catastrophe to seize control over the world's governments, and helped Hydra make its move. Hydra, who had seriously infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. at the time, began assuming control of key locations and executing anyone who stood in their way. The reveal of Captain America as a longtime Hydra agent completely took readers by surprise, and even a bit of anger. Marvel realized and even admitted to their mistake, and so the story got retconned to have it so that the character known as Cubic, who was essentially a living cosmic cube in the form of a child, was manipulated by Hydra to create a Captain America who grew up being loyal to Hydra. This Hydra Cap would eventually supplant the real Captain America of Earth 616 till the true Captain America came back and beat the snot out of him. Hydra Cap then became an actually really good villain, and Marvel has actually found a way to use the Hydra Cap again, with him recently returning under the guise of Captain Krakoa in the Fall of X storyline. But speaking of mutants, in Giant Size X-Men number 1, Charles Xavier puts together a brand new team thanks to the fact that his original X group was being held captive by the living island Krakoa. However, we later learn that this new team wasn't the only one, cause Professor X already sent another new squad of X-Men to save his original team, and they were all horribly killed. X-Men Deadly Genesis revealed that Professor X had put together a backup team of X-Men made up of Sway, Darwin, Petra, and the newly revealed and teased at third Summers brother, Vulcan. This new team all seemed to perish at the hands of Krakoa, and rather than admit to his poor decision making that got a bunch of mutants AIA and taking responsibility for it all, Charles Xavier instead just erased the minds of everyone who knew about this team, including wiping the entire memory of Vulcan from his older brother Cyclops' memory. Xavier then put together a new X-Men team that debuted in 1974's Giant Size X-Men number 1. As it was, this whole thing came back to bite Xavier in the butt big way when it turned out that Vulcan hadn't actually passed away at all. Now, sticking with the X-Men X-Men and mutants, the Mutant Massacre storyline was one of the biggest X-Men storylines of the 80s. This crossover involved evil marauders slaughtering hundreds of sewer-dwelling mutants known as Morlocks before finally being defeated by the X-Men. It's not really a complicated story, but Marvel added new layers to Mutant Massacre by retroactively inserting several characters into the story who hadn't been conceived of by Marvel creators at the time the story came out. Basically, readers would learn that the Mutant Massacre was orchestrated by Mr. Sinister because many of the Morlocks were created by his rival, Dark Beast. Sinister felt his own work was being perverted by Dark Beast, and more than that, it was revealed that Gambit was hired to lead the Marauders straight to their prey. Despite his remorse though, that revelation severely damaged Gambit's reputation as an X-Man. And last up for today, for the longest time, Bucky Barnes was one of the few comic book characters that appeared would actually remain deceased alongside Captain Marvel of the Kree. Initially believed to have perished on a mission alongside Captain America, crashing while on an experimental rocket while Cap himself went plunging into the depths and got frozen into a popsicle with a squishy center. But Bucky was in actuality captured and subjected to intense brainwashing by the USSR. When Marvel relaunched the Captain Marvel comics in 2004 under Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting, they brought in the Winter Soldier, one of the deadliest assassins in the Marvel universe, capable of going toe-to-toe with Captain America himself. And it wasn't long before Cap came to the horrified realization that his new enemy was none other than his former sidekick. Bucky's time as a ruthless, brainwashed assassin was colored by dark deeds and pretty chilling action. He came into contact with tons of characters like Nick Fury or Black Widow, who he helped train, and he even ended the life of Wolverine's wife, Itsu. This dark past would haunt him for a very long time after he returned to the side of the heroes. Now, while Bucky has rejoined the ranks of heroes, the shadow of his time as the Winter Soldier just continues to cast a long, pretty haunting presence over his character. But that's all the time I got for you today. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. I'm Adam Andrews, this Top 10 Nerd. I'll catch you on the flippy flop, but until then, stay safe and peace out, nerds.